Jack and Kate seemed like the perfect couple to those who saw them from the outside. Their marriage lasted for 10 years, and they created a life that could be called stable and successful. Jack worked as an analyst for a large corporation, and his schedule was often hectic. Kate, a talented graphic designer, worked remotely, managing her own projects from home. Their shared apartment in Brooklyn was cozy and modern, with a large view of the park outside the window. As part of their morning routine, Jack and Kate had a habit of eating breakfast together. Jack always made the coffee, and Kate made the omelet. They discussed plans for the day, laughed at jokes that only they could understand. But lately these moments have become more tense. Jack was rushing to work more and more often, skipping breakfast together, and Kate was left alone at the table with a cold cup of coffee. Their evenings have also changed. They used to enjoy watching movies together or walking the streets of New York exploring new restaurants. Now Jack often came home late, tired and irritable, and Kate spent her evenings on her laptop or with a book in her hands. A distance appeared between them, which seemed imperceptible at first, but over time turned into something more. One evening, when Jack came home from work, Kate was sitting in the living room looking at pictures from their trip to Europe a few years ago. Their faces in the photo were happy, carefree. "Do you remember this day in Paris?" she asked, showing him one of the photos. Jack just nodded, looking quickly from the photo to his phone. "Yes, the times were wonderful," he muttered. Kate felt her heart sink. She tried to connect with him, but he seemed oblivious to her efforts. She didn't know how to tell him that she felt lonely, even though they lived under the same roof. At the same time, Jack struggled with his feelings. He loved Kate, but he was consumed by work and the pressure of his responsibilities. He thought he was providing for their future, but he didn't notice that he was losing what he had here and now. It was this invisible chasm between them that became the ground for events that would change their lives forever. One day, after another long day at work, Jack came home earlier than usual. He felt tired, but also strangely eager to spend the evening with Kate. Thoughts crossed his mind that their relationship had become too cold lately, and he wanted to fix it. "Kate, I'm home!" he called, entering the apartment. She came out of the kitchen holding a cup of tea. A slight smile appeared on her face. "Early today. Is everything okay?" "Yes," Jack nodded, taking off his jacket. "I just thought that we should spend the evening together. Maybe we'll cook dinner or watch something, like in the old days." Kate was surprised by his proposal, but quickly agreed. They made dinner together, laughed about little things, and Jack felt happy. It was one of those moments when everything felt right. But this idyll was short. The next morning, when Jack was looking for his phone, he accidentally picked up Kate's phone. He wasn't even going to open it, but the screen lit up with a message. The text was sent by someone he didn't know. "Can't wait to meet you. You make my days brighter." Jack froze. Everything around seemed to freeze. My heart was pounding, and 100 questions flashed through my head. He could feel anger and pain mixing in him. Kate walked into the room and saw Jack holding her phone. Her face first expressed surprise, then changed to something akin to fear. "What is it, Kate?" His voice was low and strained. She was silent, lowering her eyes. Her silence only increased the tension. "Answer me!" Jack could no longer hold back. "What is it, Kate?" he asked, trying to keep his voice even, but it still sounded tense. Kate moved closer, sitting next to him. "This is just Richard, my colleague. We are working on a project and met for lunch. He was grateful for the ideas I offered. Nothing more." Her voice sounded calm, but with a note of excitement. Jack stared into her face, trying to tell if she was lying. "Why didn't you tell me about it?" he asked. "If it means nothing, why was it hidden?" Kate sighed. "You seem so distant lately, Jack. I was afraid that you would take it the wrong way and we would become even more distant from each other." Jack thought. Her explanation seemed logical, and although the shadows of doubts remained in his soul, her words sounded sincere. "Okay," he said finally. "I believe you, but we need to talk to each other more. I don't want there to be secrets between us." Kate nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I want that too, and I love you, Jack. Never forget this." Kate tried to convince herself that it was innocent. Only dinners, conversations, sometimes walks. But the feeling of guilt was growing in her soul. She knew she was breaking Jack's trust, but each time she told herself, One more time and I'll stop." Richard, for his part, did not hide that his feelings for her were growing. He talked more and more about how much he valued her and hinted that there could be something more between them. "You deserve to be happy, Kate," he said once, holding her hand after another meeting. She pulled out her hand and answered, "I am happy. I have Jack. We are working on our marriage." But even these words sounded unconvincing to her. The realization that she was cheating was eating away at her, but breaking that bond with Richard proved to be more difficult than she expected. Meanwhile, Jack began to notice that Kate was becoming withdrawn again. She responded to his concern, but her smile was strained, and her thoughts seemed far away. Although he trusted her after their conversation, somewhere in the back of his mind, anxiety began to rise. One day, when Kate said she was going to meet a friend, Jack decided to check. He didn't want to be paranoid, but he couldn't ignore his feelings either. That evening, he found her in a small cafe around the corner, sitting with Richard. Their laughter, leaning their heads against each other, all this broke his heart. Jack didn't go into the cafe. He stood outside watching what was happening. Jack stood on the sidewalk, watching through the glass wall of the cafe as Kate leaned closer to Richard, her smile one he hadn't seen at home in a long time. His hands clenched into fists, but he forced himself to calm down. An explosion of emotions here and now will not resolve the situation. He returned home. Every step was heavy. Questions swirled in her mind. Why did she keep doing this? Why didn't she tell him the truth? But deep inside, he already knew the answer. Their relationship was damaged more than he wanted to believe. When Kate got home, Jack was sitting in the living room trying to collect his thoughts. She came in smiling as if nothing had happened. "How was the evening?" he asked calmly, looking at her. Kate froze for a moment, but quickly regained her composure. "Everything is wonderful. We just drank coffee and talked about her new job." Jack nodded but didn't answer. His silence was heavier than any words. Kate sensed it, but didn't dare ask if something was wrong. She went to the bedroom, leaving him alone. One evening, when Kate came home, Jack decided it was time to talk. "Kate," he said, sitting opposite her on the sofa, "I want you to answer honestly. Are you seeing Richard behind my back?" Her eyes opened wide. She started to say something, but he raised his hand, stopping her. "I don't want excuses or half-truths. I know you continue to see him. I saw you. Now I want to know why." Kate lowered her head. Her hands were shaking and tears were streaming down her cheeks. "Jack, I don't know how it happened. I felt alone and he was there. He listened to me. He saw in me something more than just a stay-at-home wife. But I never wanted it to go this far." "What does so far mean?" His voice was calm but cold. "Do you love him?" Kate fell silent. She couldn't answer because she didn't know what she was feeling. Jack stood up, turning to the window. "I loved you, Kate. I trusted you. But now, I don't know if I can continue to live like this." "Jack, I want to stop this. I promise I want to keep us." Her voice trembled. She walked up to him and put her hand on his shoulder. "Give me one more chance." Jack turned to her, his eyes filled with pain. "One more chance? You already had this chance, and you betrayed me again. I don't know if I can trust you again." Kate sobbed, at a loss for words. She realized that this time her words might not be enough. Jack packed his suitcase and told Kate that he needed time to come to terms with his feelings. He went to his brother, who lived in the suburbs, leaving her alone in their empty apartment. For Kate, these were days filled with regret and despair. She knew she had lost his trust, and now she feared she had lost it forever. Jack, being away from Kate, constantly struggled with his thoughts. He loved her, but the pain of betrayal was too strong. His brother, Tom, watched and tried to cheer him up. "Listen, Jack," said Tom, handing him a cup of coffee. "People make mistakes. She says she wants to fix it. Maybe you should give her a chance?" "I already gave her a chance," answered Jack with a sigh. "She promised that everything was over, but she continued to lie. How can I trust her now?" "I am not saying that it is easy, but you have to decide. Are you ready to try again, or is it better to let go? Because living in this uncertainty is torture for both you and her." Jack was silent, considering his brother's words. Kate was left alone in their apartment, which now seemed empty and cold. Instead of the usual comfort that they had created together for years, she felt only the burden of her mistakes. Each room reminded of the moments they spent together, laughter, warm hugs, long conversations into the night. She walked around the apartment, touching things that now seemed priceless to her. In the kitchen was his favorite coffee mug. On the shelf was a book he had started to read but never finished. The smell of his perfume lingered on the pillow in the bedroom. Kate sat down on the couch, burying her face in her hands. She realized how important Jack was to her. His care, his love, even his silent presence. All this was the foundation of her life. And now, she destroyed this foundation herself. What have I done? She thought, deeply regretting her actions. Instead of talking to Jack when she felt alone, she looked to others for comfort. She chose the easy way out, which led to even more pain. Her phone, which was lying next to her, flashed a text from Richard. She looked at the screen, but this time she didn't feel the warmth that their conversations had once given. Instead, she was filled with anger. At herself and at him. She realized that it was a mistake and that her true love was always there. She loved Jack, and only now that he was gone did she realize how much. Kate picked up the phone and started texting Jack, saying all the things she couldn't say out loud. Jack, when you left, I realized that I was not just alone, but without you, the person who is the most important in my life. I thought I could find solace in someone else, but I realized that no one can replace you. I'm sorry I betrayed your trust. I'm sorry I didn't talk to you when we were having a hard time. I want nothing more than to fix this. I know I hurt you and it tears me apart. I love you, Jack. I always loved, and now I'm ready to do everything to make you feel it again. If you decide there's no future between us, I'll understand. But if you have even a shred of faith left in us, I will fight for us with all my might. Asterisk, asterisk. Jack had been living at his brother Tom's house for several weeks. The silence and tranquility of the suburbs seemed to him both a salvation and a challenge. There was no noise from the city, but the solitude only intensified his thoughts about Kate. He kept replaying their last conversations in his head, trying to figure out if there was a chance for their marriage to be restored. One morning, as Jack was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, he heard the sound of a car pulling up to the house next door. Looking over the railing, he saw a woman carrying boxes from the trunk. She was young, with brown hair that fell softly to her shoulders and a bright smile, even though she was obviously tired. New neighbors? Jack asked Tom, who was just leaving the house. Yes, answered the brother. This is Lydia. She just moved here. Looks like he works as a photographer or something. Come on, get to know me while you're here. Jack waved it off, but after a few minutes, seeing her trying to carry a heavy box, decided to come over and help. Allow me, he said, coming closer. It looks like it could knock you down. She looked up in surprise, but immediately smiled. Thank you, I slightly overestimated my strength. Jack, he introduced himself, taking the box in his hands. Lydia, very nice, Jack. This meeting was the beginning of their acquaintance. Jack noticed Lydia around the house more and more often, and they started talking. She turned out to be cheerful, intelligent, and sincere. Lydia traveled a lot because of her work as a photographer and had incredible stories about different parts of the world. Her cheerfulness impressed Jack, who felt something begin to change in him. One day, Lydia invited him to dinner. She cooked pasta and opened a bottle of wine. Their conversation easily moved from jokes to deeper topics. What brings you here, Jack? She asked, looking at him through the glass. Jack thought about it, then decided to be honest. A marriage that is bursting at the seams. I'm trying to figure out if I can fix it or if it's better to let it go. Lydia nodded, her gaze softening. This is not an easy decision, but sometimes life gives us a second chance in a completely unexpected place. The time spent with Lydia became for Jack a ray of light in a dark tunnel. He began to notice his thoughts of Kate recede, giving way to a new sense of intimacy with Lydia. Their walks, conversations, and even silence were filled with a warmth that Jack hadn't felt in a long time. One evening, standing under the starry sky, Lydia unexpectedly took his hand. Jack, I don't know what awaits us ahead, but I know one thing: you deserve happiness. And if it's with me, I'm ready to try. Her words made Jack's heart beat faster. He still wasn't sure if he was ready to start something new, but for the first time in a long time he felt hopeful. Jack realized that he was at a crossroads. He had to decide whether to go back to Kate and try to save their marriage or open the door to a new start with Lydia. One thing was clear: His life would never be the same again. After that night under the starry sky, everything began to change between Jack and Lydia. Their relationship no longer seemed like just friendship. It was something deeper and more real. Lydia did not try to fill the void in Jack's life, but she became the one who brought into his life the sincerity and warmth that he so desperately needed. One day off, they went for a walk in a forest park nearby. Lydia took her camera with her to capture the autumn scenery, and Jack watched with interest as she worked. Her passion for nature, her ability to find beauty in every detail impressed him. "You see the world differently than others," he said as she photographed a leaf hanging from a branch. "I think that beauty is always close to us," she answered. "It's just that we often don't notice it. Maybe I just learned to look more carefully." Jack smiled. That simple conversation made him wonder how much he had missed when he was consumed by his past and his own pain. Over time, Lydia became the person Jack could be real with. Their evenings were filled with conversations about dreams, fears, past, and future. She was not afraid to ask difficult questions, but always did so with warmth. "What are you most afraid of?" she asked one evening as they sat by the fire in the backyard. Jack thought. "Probably to lose another opportunity to be happy. I spent years in a relationship that felt right but was empty. I am afraid to repeat this mistake." Lydia took his hand. "Happiness is not about being perfect. It's about finding someone you can be real with. And if you let it, I promise I will never let your life be empty." Her words touched the deepest parts of his soul. He felt that with Lydia, he did not need to be anyone else. She saw him as he was and accepted him. Their relationship developed slowly, without haste. They cooked dinner together, listened to music, and laughed at little things. Every day with her was filled with moments that Jack wanted to keep in his memory forever. One day, Lydia suggested a photo shoot to help Jack feel free. "Me, model?" he laughed. "It's not mine." "Trust me," she smiled. "This is not about ideality. It's about seeing yourself in a different light." He agreed, and they set out for the old bridge at sunset. Lydia was showing him how to stand and making him laugh while he forgot his awkwardness. The results of her work impressed him. "Is it me?" He was surprised, looking at the photos. "It's you," she said. "The one I see every day." Jack understood more and more that Lydia was not just someone who helped him move on. She was the one he had been looking for all his life without even realizing it. Her sincerity and openness became an inspiration for him. One evening during a walk, he stopped, holding her hand. "Lydia, you changed my life. I don't know how it happened, but you made me believe in love again, and I want you to know that you are what makes me truly happy." She smiled and answered, "And I'm glad that you gave yourself a chance for happiness, because you deserve it." Their romance was filled with something that Jack did not experience with Kate: lightness, warmth, and authenticity. They built their relationship on mutual understanding, without illusions and deception, and this is what gave them a chance for a happy future. For a long time, Kate could not accept the reality that Jack had left her. She tried to convince herself that all was not lost, that they could fix everything. She wrote him letters that remained unanswered, called him, but he always politely said that he needed time. This silence was tearing her apart from the inside. One day, Kate decided she couldn't wait any longer. She knew that Jack was living in her brother Tom's house and decided to come there to talk to him face to face. Her heart sank with anxiety, but she was determined to do whatever it took to win back the man she still loved. When Kate arrived at the house, the sun was already setting, bathing the suburb in a warm, soft light. She went to the door, ready to knock, but something made her stop. She saw Jack and a woman she didn't know leave the house together. Lydia was laughing, her hand on Jack's shoulder, and he was looking at her in a way he hadn't looked at Kate in a long time. Their closeness was obvious, and Kate felt her heart sink. She remained in place, unable to move. Jack saw her first. His smile disappeared and he took a step forward, removing Lydia's hand from his shoulder. "Kate, what are you doing here?" Lydia looked at Kate in surprise, but immediately understood who was in front of her. She delicately moved a little to the side, trying not to get in the way, but staying close to Jack. Kate tried to control herself, but her voice was shaking. "I came to talk to you, Jack. To ask you to come back, but it seems I was too late." Her gaze fell on Lydia, and tears were already gathering in her eyes. "Kate, Jack began, but she raised her hand, stopping him. No, let me tell you, I made a mistake. I betrayed your trust, but I never stopped loving you. I wanted to fix everything. I wanted to prove to you that we can start again. But now, I see that you have already started it without me. Her voice broke and tears began to stream down her cheeks. Kate, I didn't want you to find out like this, Jack said, his voice soft but firm. I thought for a long time whether there is a chance for us. I forgave you. But that doesn't mean we can get back what we had. I no longer feel like I was with you. And now you feel better with her? Kate asked, nodding in Lydia's direction. Lydia wanted to say something, but changed her mind, keeping it between them. Yes, said Jack after a pause. She helped me understand that I deserve to be happy. And it's not because you did something wrong, but because I've changed. Kate couldn't listen anymore. She turned away, burying her face in her hands. Her sobs were muffled but hard to ignore. Jack took a step towards her, but she took a sharp step back. No, you don't have to, I understand. This is the end, right? Jack nodded silently. Kate quickly walked to her car, leaving them in the yard. Sitting behind the wheel, she gave free rein to the tears that were tearing her soul. She understood that she had lost him forever, and there was no longer a chance to correct the mistakes. Jack stood in silence for a long time, watching Kate's car drive away. Lydia gently touched his hand. Are you sure that she understood? She understood, he answered. His voice was quiet, but that doesn't make it any less painful. Lydia stayed by his side, giving him time. She understood that it was a difficult decision for Jack and respected his pain, but she also knew that now their future depended on just the two of them. Kate got into the car, her face wet with tears. She tried to calm herself, but her breathing was ragged and her heart was pounding in her chest. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel so hard that her knuckles turned white. She was driving down an empty road, illuminated by the soft light of street lamps, but her thoughts were in chaos. He chose her. It's over. These words constantly sounded in her head. She could see Jack's face in front of her, his look full of determination and pity. And Lydia was next to her, confident and calm. Kate felt she had nothing left. How could I destroy everything like that? She whispered to herself, flooding with a new wave of tears. Distracted by her thoughts, Kate didn't notice how her car slightly went out of the lane. There were not many cars on the road, but an oncoming truck appeared suddenly. The driver honked, but Kate didn't have time to react. Everything happened in seconds. A loud crash, metal screeching, glass splashing. Her car went off the road, flipping several times before coming to a stop. The silence came suddenly, broken only by the faint sound of the engine still running. In a few minutes, an ambulance and the police arrived at the scene of the accident. The truck driver, who was uninjured, said he tried to avoid the collision but was unable to. Kate was pulled from the car, but her injuries were too serious. She died on the spot. The news quickly reached Tom, Jack's brother. When he got the call from the police, his face turned pale. He looked up at Jack sitting in the living room with Lydia. Jack, you must hear it, said Tom, his voice hollow. Jack frowned at the look on his brother's face. What happened? Tom sat down next to him. This is Kate. She had an accident on the way back. He stopped, but then said the words Jack was afraid to hear. She died. Jack froze. His brain refused to accept this information. He felt his heart begin to ache with the weight of the loss. All their last conversations, all the unspoken words, suddenly became unbearable. No, he whispered, getting to his feet. This is impossible. Lydia approached him, but did not know what to say. She understood that even though their relationship was just beginning, Jack still had feelings for Kate, maybe even ones he didn't realize. Jack spent the night alone, sitting on the porch and staring into the darkness. He felt guilty. He understood that his words, his choices could push Kate to this tragic end. He couldn't shake the thought that if he had done something differently, things might have turned out differently. At Kate's funeral, Jack stood in the back rows holding Lydia's hand. Her death left a deep wound in his soul that could not be simply forgotten. But he also understood that life goes on, and he must find a way to live on, remembering the lessons of the past. The tragedy was a reminder for Jack of how fragile life is. He no longer allowed himself to hold grudges or avoid important conversations. With Lydia, They began to build their future on mutual understanding, realizing that true love is not only passion, but also care, forgiveness, and the ability to appreciate every moment they spend together. After Kate's funeral, Jack could not find a place for himself for a long time. Her death became a lesson for him about the fragility of life and the importance of making the right decisions at the right time. He knew the tragedy wouldn't erase his guilt or the memories of their life together, but now all that was left was to move on. Lydia became his support in the most difficult moments. She didn't try to change him or turn him away from the past, but she was there when he needed her. She gave him space to grieve, listened when he wanted to talk, and just held his hand when words weren't enough. Several months have passed. Jack and Lydia decided to move together to another city to start from scratch. He knew that he would not be able to forget Kate, but he understood that her death should not deprive him of his chance at happiness. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their new apartment, Jack took Lydia's hand. "Lydia, I want you to know, you helped me survive the most difficult period in my life. I don't know where I would be without you. You became for me not only a new beginning, but also the meaning of moving forward." She smiled, her eyes sparkling in the candlelight. "Jack, I'm here because I want to be with you. We've both been through our own, but I believe that together we can create something beautiful." Jack nodded, feeling his heart calm for the first time in a long time. Years passed, and Jack learned to live with the memory of Kate, not allowing that memory to define his life. With Lydia, he built a relationship that was genuine and filled with love. Their lives were not perfect, but they were honest. And this, in the end, became the most important thing for Jack. He understood the main thing: you can't change the past, but you can learn to build a happy future, even if the road to it was difficult.